It's a pleasure for me to introduce the newly minted Vice Chancellor for Research and Economic Development today, Sherri Jones. Sherri has been serving as College of Education Dean since July 1 of 2019. Prior to that, she was a professor in and chair of the Department of Special Education and Communication Disorders. She was also director of the Barclay Memorial Center. Prior to that, she was served 8 years as a professor of communication at East Carolina University. She earned her Bachelor of Science in Speech Pathology, Audiology, Master of Science in Audiology, and a doctorate in Psychological and Cultural Studies. All degrees were from this institution, the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Sherri is going to talk to us today about the future of education. And we're very happy to have her with us. Please help me welcome Vice Chancellor Sherri Jones.
Thank you, Larry. Gosh, it's sure a pleasure to be with you. And I thank you for your flexibility to enable me to come speak today. It's been a whirlwind week. I'll just say that. It proves that the higher education can turn on a dime when they wish to. And I hope to make some pushes so we turn on a dime more quickly moving forward. But it is a pleasure to be with you. And one thing I will say is that I am a proud alum of the College of Education and Human Sciences. My 3 children, their spouses, and I have 12 degrees from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I was here 12 years as a student, 12 years as an administrator. I did tell the chancellor I will not be 12 years in the interim role. It's a 12-month appointment, but 12 is a lucky number, I guess. And it is now 12 o'clock, so time for us to begin our presentation today. So I sort of changed the title of my talk a little bit to about transforming higher education, because I do believe we are in a time period of transformation. All of my remarks will be focused on higher education today, but one could extrapolate things that I'm going to say to the K-12 space and perhaps the pre-K to 12 space. But it's obviously, to speak about all of education is a very large subject, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the challenges that we are currently facing, but to also leave you with some opportunities. And I'm primarily going to be focusing on opportunities that the College of Education and Human Sciences has been engaged in, and that's simply because that's where I come from and that's where my most previous experiences are. I do not negate that there may be opportunities happening all across campus to try to address some of our challenges. And I'm certainly learning a lot in the Office of Research and Economic Development about how that office is working to serve the campus as a whole. So, all right, so I know this is a very busy slide and has a lot of information on it here, but what I wanted to present in terms of some history is really to represent where higher education was, starting at the founding of Harvard in 1646, and what has transpired over several centuries in terms of the pressures that have enabled or allowed or pressured higher education to evolve, along with a westward expansion. So growth of a nation and westward expansion were some of those pressures. The public sentiments about the role of higher education, the people that higher education was trying to serve were pressures that caused higher education to evolve. And just a few points, in 1800, there were 25 degree granting colleges that enrolled less than 1,000 students. And a century later, there were nearly 1,000 colleges and universities serving the nation. And in 1981, there are 3,000 colleges and universities. And I looked up in 2023, there were 4,000. So growth has slowed over time. But nevertheless, pressures that resulted in champions arising for envisioning a future of higher education that differed from what stood before. So, for example, when Harvard was founded, the curriculum was very classical curriculum: Greek, Latin, Aramaic, arithmetic, geometry, nature of plants. Was very much about recitation and what's the word I'm looking for? I want to say regurgitation, but it was about lessons of verbatim, right? Repeating what was being shared. And you can see some examples here of various colleges that pushed the envelope, tried new things. Certainly the Morrill Act was a policy that changed the face of higher education and opened the land-grant institutions, who had a very specific mission to extend the work of the campus into communities. And in fact, the context for change, while our pressures we are facing today may seem new and challenging, they are certainly challenging, but I would argue they're not new. So historically, the context for change has been about economic, demographic, and technological advances, which we are certainly seeing today. Social institutions perceived as out of step and not as relevant as they could be. Pressures by the public and financial woes, we are seeing those today. And very powerful forces that were evident in the government, industry, the Industrial Revolution, for example, and declining enrollments. And in fact, I would argue that the institution of higher education today is very much ingrained in what occurred during the Industrial Revolution, developing programs of mass education, if you will, and perhaps our next revolution, which is around the knowledge economy, will pressure us to change once again. So let's take a look at some of the current economic, demographic, social pressures, and so forth, perceptions, if you will, currently. So here's some of the social perceptions that are facing us today about higher education being out of step, that individuals are skipping college, do not see its value, do not see its use for their future, and a lost generation of high school graduates. Where are they going? What are they doing? So these are some of the headlines that have been in the news the past year, and certainly reflect a public perception about the relevance and importance of higher education. How we respond to that is going to be important. This is a Gallup poll that was done in July of 2003. And what you can see here is that just a short time ago in 2015, almost 60% of the public thought that higher education, they had a great deal or quite a lot of confidence. In 2023, 62% of the public had some or not very much confidence in higher education. Again, a dramatic shift in the perceptions of the public regarding the role of, the importance of, and the contributions of higher education. Is college worth it? Is a question that parents and our prospective students are increasingly asking. I just put a little bit of data on this slide. 20 years ago, the UNL tuition rates for undergraduate and graduate, and in 2023, and those tuition rates have grown 108% in 20 years. So this too is a big concern for parents and caregivers and our prospective students. How can they afford higher education? And then if they find ways to afford it, is it meaningful for the building their future careers and their earning potentials? Over time, the student share of the cost of education has grown in every state. So I show here the US on the right and Nebraska on the left. And you can see that back in 1980, the students' share of total education revenue was 22%. Today, it's 37%, which means that students are carrying a bigger burden of the education revenue. The same is true for the nation. Now, Of course, the reasons for this are likely many and complex, and I don't want to spend our time together diving into those reasons, but certainly declining state and federal support for education are two factors, are probably a main factor, but there are likely others. We are also facing an enrollment cliff. In 2025, the number of students projected to be college age and college bound will decline by 15% from 2025 to 2029. So I mentioned to you that historically, one of the reasons for higher education to change was the financial woes related to declining education. And here it is, staring us full on in the face. In just the last 10 years, from 2010 to 2020, the enrollment declines have varied across the states. I've put a square around Nebraska. Our enrollment has declined by 10%. As a nation, enrollment declined by 8%. But on this graph, you can see that some states, Alaska, for example, have declined by 35%. On the other extreme, Idaho has grown by 16%. I don't know what the reasons are for the states on the left here growing as much as they have, but might be worth a look. Needless to say, enrollment is declining. And since 2019, our enrollment in Nebraska has declined a little over 6%. So these graphs, again, Nebraska on the left and the US on the right, certainly our enrollment is mimicking the national trends. So nationally, enrollment is declining overall, but the opportunity to experience and have significant enrollment increases, of course, it's a goal, but the data suggests that's going to be a difficult road ahead for enrollment growth. And then we had this little event called a pandemic, and that has certainly created perception and experiences that we are still grappling with, I would say, in all of education. So this is a recent survey that was done in 2021, and I know it's a little bit busy, but on the left are really the upshots of the conclusions here. That because in the pandemic, we transitioned all of our programming to online, which, by the way, is another wonderful example of how an institution can mobilize and change quickly when needed. But nevertheless, over half of students, and they're broken out here, disaggregated in several ways, but overall, over half are concerned that their degree is less valuable when the program is delivered online. Half agree that quality is questionable in online education, and almost 2/3 say that college is not worth the cost. 18% of high school seniors say the pandemic has made them less likely to attend college. So we have an enrollment cliff that we're facing, and we have a group of students that, based on the pandemic, are not planning to go to college. So the collective effects of that are going to make enrollment growth extremely challenging. Now, I will say, despite the fact that 18% of high school students do not plan to go to college, the pandemic did not affect 80% of them. So I think that is a bright spot at the same time that we're, having to contend with and think carefully about that almost 20% who don't plan to go to college. And then finally, this is a busy pie graph, but again, on the left are the conclusionary comments. And that is that when students think about what they would like from the federal government in terms of higher education, nearly half would like policies that make college more affordable. So this gets back to the cost of education. 1/3 would like to prioritize policies that alleviate student loan repayments. So clearly students are increasingly required to take out student loans to afford their education. And 1 in 10 want to see stronger accountability measures. So if I'm paying more for college, what am I going to get from that, right? And how are they accountable to my education, my career, my goals, right? So wanting to see more accountability. So revisiting then the context for change, I would argue that our context for change today is not any different than it has been many times throughout history. We have social pressures, we have economic pressures, we have enrollment pressures, and we have government, industry also playing a factor in what we need to think about moving forward. What I would argue that might be new today is the need for change is more urgent today. And that's primarily because of the knowledge economy. So the knowledge economy is the idea that today, knowledge is everywhere, every time, every possible knowledge that one could access. Okay, so you think about music, movies, the news, even opinion, right? It's in front of us at every moment of every day, accessible when and if we want to access it, and accessible in the mode that we would like to access it. That's different today than in history. The speed of communication accelerates the time frame for experimentation. The time frame that we can discover something or evaluate something and communicate it contributes to the pressures beyond us, commenting on, giving feedback about, so that communication cycle is accelerating the time frame for change and experimentation. And the scale of change today is larger than that of the Industrial Revolution, primarily because today we have 4,000 colleges and universities as compared to the smaller number historically. And so ramping up change that would be adopted and utilized by 4,000 institutions is a big chunk to chew on, right? So there's a recent book out that I absolutely love, and you might have seen this referenced in several of my slides, The Great Upheaval by Arthur Levine and Scott Van Pelt. And they argue several impacts that are underway for higher education. And one of those is that the institutional control of higher education will decrease and the power of the consumer will increase. And this is part of the desire for accountability measures. This is the desire of our students to co-create their learning. This is a desire for students to have a say in the information they want to access, how they want to access it, when they want to access it. That's the consumer a part of this picture. Because there's near universal access to information, students are going to seek from us the same things they're getting from music, movie, and the news. They want it when they want it, how they want it, how often they want to access it. How are we going to respond to that? There's new content producers out there. Google University is offering coursework and programs to students to complete a program of study and move into employment in Google and its subsidiaries. So our competition is no longer accredited universities around the nation or the world. There's all kinds of information delivery models out there and students taking advantage of those. The industrial era model of higher education focused on time, process, and teaching. This is going to be replaced by knowledge economy rooted in outcomes and learning. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And then finally, our dominance of degrees and just-in-case education will diminish in favor of credentials, badges, other kinds of mechanisms for showing your certification of knowledge. And those will be just in time, not just in case. So as a College of Education and Human Sciences, we've been thinking a lot about these things. What does this mean for how we think about who we are, what we do, who our prospective students are, and how we will meet the future needs? Where will the puck be, so to speak, in 25 years? So as the college has done its work to think through all these types of impacts that are facing us, I have articulated 3 priorities for the college. Now, I'm no longer the dean, I understand that, but I do feel confident that the college has done its shared governance in developing our priorities and our future vision. So I feel confident to share these with you today, and if even for a conversation point, because we will have time for Q&A. So what I think we need to do is to transform our structures to thrive beyond the tenure of any leaders. And you all know we're a campus that's facing a lot of leadership changes. And by structures here, I don't just mean our organizational structures. I mean our mindset, I mean our governance documents. So lots of things around structures. Transforming our educational practices from an instructional paradigm to a learning paradigm. So this is moving from credit hours to competencies, time in seats to time in the field, those kinds of things. We'll talk more about that. And then finally, engagement with community partners that invites a mutually beneficial collaboration with our community, with the public, with the individuals who are pressuring us to change. And how can we build these truly mutually beneficial collaborations that will enable learning, scholarship, and real-world experiences to happen in true partnership? So what I'd like to leave you with are some examples of ways that the college has embraced these priorities and how we are thinking to the future. So first of all is about our mindset. So the college underwent a visioning day, and we talked about if we were going to move towards a future, what does that future look like in terms of what we value? And then what might those future values, which are shown here under Horizon 3, be in contention with today, which is Horizon 1? And then Horizon 2 are the transformational actions that will take us from today to the future. So I just share this with you today. You might recognize some of these values, if you will, or descriptors under Horizon 1. Perhaps these were features of your time when you were in the institution. And what we hope for as a college is a future that is learner-centered, that is equity-centered, is about we, not me, that we are all have the capacity for dialogue, listening, and learning. We can exude dignity, self-respect, humanity, and community. We're flexible and responsive, and we're moving away from some of these things on the left. Now, I'm not saying what's on the left is bad and what's on the right is good. We want to preserve what's valued and important from today and preserve that into the future. But really, this is about a shift in our mindset. And we're working to think about what are the actions we take that will reflect more and more of the values on the right of this page. So how do we change our mindset? Number 2 is our organizational structure. So if you look on the left, this is an org chart, and many of us have seen org charts. But what you might notice, if you look at an org chart without anybody's names or titles on it, you can see the layers of administration, and you can see the silos of the things down vertically, right? So we talk a lot about reducing the layers of administration, breaking down the barriers and the silos. And I would argue that an organizational structure, perhaps more like a Venn diagram, might be a better structure, if you will, for an organization. Now, what that looks like, we haven't figured out, but I put it out there as a provocative idea. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. But one thought about the Venn diagram on the right is that this would be an organization that would, first and foremost, the organization comes first, and then we elevate faculty governance. And within these circles are various other circles that change, and they're dynamic, they change over time. A lot to talk about there, but I think a very good thought exercise, both for the college and the campus. So we could physically change our organizational structures. And then I'll move to our educational paradigm. So this is about transforming our educational practices. You might recognize a lot of things on the left during your time in the institution, and we still are in this mode. We deliver instruction. A degree is based on the number of credit hours completed. We talk about the hours of instruction. We hold time constant, and a student will sink or swim within that time period. The learning paradigm is all about learning. It is about outcomes. It is about a degree that is based on knowledge and skills. It is about learner-centered, and it's about learning held constant, and time varies. Now, I get it completely that as a campus and the organizations and entities we report to, 4-year and 6-year graduation rates are important pieces of information. I just would like to talk about completion rates. I could say to you that I bet almost 100% of students in the College of Education and Human Sciences complete, but they're not all going to complete in 4 years. These are not our students of today. Our students of today are caregivers. They work 2 and 3 jobs. They have a huge number of things on their plates. So maybe 4-year graduation rates is a little antiquated. Don't tell the chancellor I said that. I get it. We have to report the 4-year graduation rates. And we are working hard to help students move along. But learning held constant and time varies means we'll have completers, and we are confident that the knowledge and skills they have acquired are those needed for entry-level careers. So here's one example in the college where a program took this approach about outcomes and changed their model of educational practice. So this is the audiology curriculum, and in full disclosure, I'm an audiologist by training. I planted a seed many years ago. I think audiology could do this, and the faculty took it and ran with it. So on the left, you see our traditional curriculum model. Course, course, course in silos, clinic experience in a silo, and those silos, repeat each year with new knowledge each year. Each course covers introductory to advanced material, and then we ask students to put that all together at the end and integrate it all. It's no surprise that when students got to the end of that curriculum, this and this added up to a big I don't know. Okay, so what the program did was they sat down and spent a day. What does a competent entry-level professional look like in terms of knowledge and skills? And then they did backward design to develop a curriculum that now begins with introductory topics and subject matter that gets repeated again and again in more depth each time it appears. Faculty are co-teaching from the beginning, and each faculty member bringing their particular expertise to the table. So faculty get to teach what they love, and the students are working on the integration and the application of that knowledge all together in an integrated way. So the clinicians and the scientists are working together, co-creating experiences with the students. We are now in the 3rd year of delivering this curriculum. The students love it. The faculty love it. There are still tweaks that need to be made, but it's an example of something we can do very differently to address the pressures that are placed upon us in this time frame. And then finally, I'll say a little bit about engagement. So if we are in true engagement with our community partners, what is it that they would like to see? And I just list here several examples of what our community partners would like from us. So we just started in partnership with Lincoln Public Schools an apprenticeship program that will enable paraprofessionals to achieve their teaching credential in special education while they are on the job working full-time as a paraprofessional. Okay, we are going to seek approval from the U.S. Department of Labor to be an apprenticeship program, which will open up avenues of funding and other supports for that endeavor. Our audiology program is an example of competency-based education. Are building pipelines to the workforce. So how are we enabling the continuum of learners to achieve their next goals, right? It's not just about 18 to 22-year-olds, but who's retooling, who hasn't completed college and would like to return, who needs to or would like to move to a new career stage or a new career. How are we helping in those ways? And finally, workforce that represents community. Are we developing a workforce where all children, all individuals in the community can see people who look like them? So to finish, yes, we have pressures for change. Let's take that all in, consider what we must do, and then let's get out of denial, okay? We have a demand for change. Let's get out of denial. Let's experiment and try some initiatives. I mean, that's what higher education is about, right? To experiment. And ultimately, what probably needs to happen, or what needs to happen, is once experimentation has happened, and this generally does happen in little ways. So I would say what the College of Education and Human Sciences is doing today is on the periphery of the global higher education change that may be needed, but one has to start somewhere. So let's be the leader. But these models do need to get diffused, right? So as change occurs, how is that diffusing to other institutions? And we do need champions, right? Champions for change, champions that will fully embrace and show the way, if you will, to the larger industry. And then those practices need to get standardized and accepted and adopted. This might mean some future changes for Carnegie, right? Our Carnegie unit and other things. And then how do you scale that up so that policy and standardization is a commonality and not just a oddity? So I thank you for your kind attention. I hope that I have shared with you a bit of the challenges facing higher education, but embracing those challenges and the opportunities that exist ahead of us. So I will end there, and I'd be happy to take some questions or comments. So thank you very much for your time today.
I am a big fan of community-based education. What thoughts do you have on preparing community partners to be good co-educational, partners?
Yeah.
The public school is a good example because they're already in the educational process, but some of the other community partners might be great sites, may have some assistance.
Yeah, so I think some important things there are bringing people to the table early in your thought processes, having openness to your partners bringing to the table, right? So it's not just a one-way street. Give and take is really important. Many times we think we can't do something because of the way we've always done it. So what's the give and take? What can we compromise on? What might we not be able to? Honesty and integrity in the whole process of conversation. And then this really supporting and developing this co-creation. So what we did with Lincoln Public Schools, was really talked about what the paraprofessionals do in the course of their day? What does their workday look like? How can we modify our delivery of curriculum to align with that? What are the supports needed in the schools as well as the supports needed at campus when they come to campus? The financial pieces have to all be on the table. So it really is about, we're true collaborators, right? And that's early and often engagement, everyone equal voice, give and take, and be fearless to try something.
So how do you address students and parents who are worried that they're not being prepared for like a job? You know what I mean? Like when I was in high school, I thought that every job had some sort of like rope.
Magical thing, yeah.
Right. And now there's so many, okay, I'm just going to show my hand here. I majored in journalism and my minors were like history. And these are, people think these are worthless skills now.
Yeah.
And maybe I did have a worthless major, but I think not.
No.
So how do we convince people that those are still valuable?
Yeah, well, actually, I will say employers are really looking for soft skills today: critical thinking, problem solving, handling stress. How do you engage in dialogue with people? So those are the kinds of things we can share with parents and students about what employers are looking for. And then I think we also talk about how you are here, and many of our students are here for a goal of a career, right? They want to be a teacher. They want to be an audiologist. But how, during their time with us, do we help them see that what they are learning contributes to many opportunities, right? And we bring people to campus to visit with them. So we bring many teachers who maybe aren't in a classroom, but they're teaching in a whole variety of ways, just not in a classroom. And we have to build community. So there's community with your program of study, certainly, but how do we build the broader community? A community that cuts across all our endorsement areas, a community that cuts across all our health programs, a community that cuts across education and human sciences. So how we build community so that people are actually experiencing the commonalities as well as the uniquenesses of their professions. So those are some ways that we do it, maybe some better than others, but
I'm not sure we reward faculty in a way that remotely encourages, maybe in your college, encourages what you're looking at as the outcomes.
Yeah.
In some colleges, and I just retired this year.
Yeah.
In some colleges, teaching is the lowest, is the hardest to evaluate, and it's the lowest rewarded piece of the assignment.
Yeah.
Or there's a two-tiered system in my college where you have faculty who teach very few classes, and then you have professors of practice who are the large teachers who have the biggest impact, who make the least amount of money and don't have permanent positions. So I think these are admirable goals. And I think if you talk to our students, if you talk to people in industry, you talk to leaders in business, they'll agree. But we're not structured in higher ed to do that. So what's your response to that?
Yep, we need to restructure that. So here's some things we've done there. So one, we step back to the Board of Regents bylaws to find our charge. Okay. And if you look in the Board of Regents bylaws, the primary mission of the university is teaching. So we talked about that, right, as a college. Secondly, research is important. It's not what's taking a second place, but the Board of Regents bylaws clearly stipulates teaching is our primary mission and the importance of research. And they frame they actually use the word scholarship, and they frame it under Boyer's model of scholarship. That is scholarship of discovery, which we often think of as research, scholarship of integration, application, and teaching and learning. So what we're doing as a college is we are starting from those people who give us our charge. And what is that charge? And I think we need to revisit that as a campus, and we need to have some healthy dialogue about Boyer's model of scholarship, and are we as a campus all on board with Boyer's model of scholarship? And then what does that say about our reward system, our evaluation system, our promotion and tenure system? I mean, truly, the conversations happening in the college are just those. How do we then revise our structures to meet that charge? I think it needs to happen at the campus level. I absolutely do.
Sherri,
Yes,
over here.
yes, yes.
You've talked about this change, but as you and I both know, change is extremely difficult for the faculty member, for the staff, for
Yeah.
students, and particularly, I think, for administration.
Yeah.
And you gave an example of what you did in your department. What can leaders do, whether those leaders are the department chair, whether they're the administration, the dean, whether they're the business leaders? How can they support, and how did you support your department through those stages
Yeah.
so that they could make those changes?
Yeah. Well, we had a lot of dialogue about mission, vision, and values. Then we can ask ourselves, are we living the values that we need to achieve our mission and vision? And then what are the structures that need to be in place to achieve that mission and vision? Like, we can't just have those things be words on a paper, right? So dialogue, then we put resources to the ideas we wanted to try. So when this idea came forward from the program of audiology, the faculty were concerned about their teaching apportionments. I said, we'll keep all your teaching apportionments just as they are, and you design it, and let's get going and build it. And then all the way through, we're going to take a look. Do the teaching apportionments make sense for what you're doing now? Do the apportionments make sense for what you're doing now? So that we as leaders are supporting the whole enterprise around the change that needs to happen. I don't know if that gets to your question, but that's a little bit of example of what we tried. And I think the ideas need to be at the table. I'm already sharing some ideas a weekend to the Vice Chancellor for Research and Economic Development. And the conversations we're having are mission, vision, values. Then our org chart. How are we structured to achieve that mission and vision, if in fact that's what we want to achieve? So for me, it's about mission, vision, and values.
Hey, Sherri,
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you. And I can tell that I've missed some really exciting conversations over the last 3 years since I retired. And I admire you for taking this on and being willing to think differently about what our future might look like. I'm going to push back on one thing.
Yeah.
I've wondered what it would be like if a university was actually a lifelong partner with learners, which means there will be times when a learner, when a person needs to learn something. There may be times when that person needs to partner with our research enterprise. And there may be times when that person needs to partner with a department or faculty who can work with them side by side in an engagement model to try to accomplish something that's important to them. So when I think about a university who behaves like that, I don't think there's any priority to teaching, learning, research, engagement, that in fact, all are critically important if we're willing to take on that role as a lifelong partner.
Yes, and actually, I don't think we're in too much disagreement. The thing that you're saying is teaching, learning happens everywhere and in all kinds of experiences. What we need to ask ourselves is, how do those things in our current environment contribute to a credit hour, right? That's really the mapping I think we have to do until we can ultimately be in a place where the learning and the outcomes are they're still there, don't get me wrong, but we do have to work within the system that exists, which is one about credit hours. So how does that learning, the student in the field, spending multiple weeks there, they're not sitting in a classroom, but learning is happening, right? So it's the idea that learning happens everywhere in all kinds of ways. How do we count that? Whereas right now, a lot of that happens on top of 120 credit hours.
So, Sherri?
Yeah.
Would you explain a little bit to us what is meant by student-centered learning?
Yes. Yes.
The tradition has been that we hire in a university experts, professors, who
Yes.
provide knowledge to students so that they can learn efficiently.
Yes.
The person who's teaching has experience in a particular field, the student does not. A student could go many directions without some guidance. So
Yes.
what is learner-centered education?
Yeah. It's not chaos, I'll tell you that, although it might feel like it. And you mentioned all those things that we absolutely need. We need faculty with disciplinary expertise. We need faculty who can deliver knowledge, demonstrate skills, et cetera, But student-centered means that I don't approach my classroom as if every student is the same. In other words, the assumption made that in this class, every student comes with the same knowledge and experiences. They will sit and listen to me as I lecture over time, and then they will all depart with, acquiring the same level of knowledge. Student-centered means I recognize that every student sitting in my class comes with a different set of knowledge and experiences. And what I need to do in creating a learning environment is, what does that learning environment need to look like for each student in that class? Now, I'm not saying it's a unique learning environment for every student, but where are the flexibilities? Where are the individualized learning? Where's the individualization that may need to happen to keep every student matriculating along at their rate of learning, not at my prescribed rate of learning? So it gets complex quickly. And I would say that in the context of an entire institution, the learning paradigm is likely a very expensive prospect because of the supports that need to be wrapped around students. But in each course at present, this concept of student-centered can be visible and can be valuable to the students who are there for that time period, which is the environment we live in today. Does that kind of get to your?
170.
Yeah.
Some have been to a couple of universities,
Yeah.
are going to need 180.
Yeah.
Because we have
Yeah.
buckets.
Yes.
This has to be A6.
Yes.
This has to be A7.
Yes, yes,
This has to be, in my college, a college distribution
Yeah.
requirement.
yes.
We can't trade
Yeah.
educational experiences they have
Yeah.
for some of the things we would like for the ideal person who starts as an 18-year-old freshman.
Yeah.
And if we're really going to worry about the cost of education,
Yeah.
and we're really going to be learner-centered, we have to figure out how not to take these students who are often the most economically challenged and make college really expensive because it's really long.
Yeah, so I think your question is around, you mentioned all great challenges. I would just turn the thinking a bit to be about, if we are going to offer avenues for every student, let's say, to have an opportunity at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, what is it that we need to think about that will break down the barriers for each and every student, whether you put students in buckets or you consider each student individually? So there's two camps of thought. One is we just don't have avenues for students, or one, we have avenues for students, but what do those avenues need to look like? So that, the student with limited knowledge and the student with all the advantages, are they sitting in the same class together? Or what is the pathways that we create for everyone to be successful? I don't have the answer for that, but I personally, and this might be too idealistic, I really want to not throw people away. I really want to see every individual achieve their maximum potential, contribute to their communities in meaningful and constructive ways, and enjoy optimum health and well-being throughout the lifespan. What is the role for higher education in making that happen? One example I will give you is in California, there was an institution, this was a college of engineering, and they wanted to accelerate the number of women going into engineering. What they recognized was, for whatever reasons, women coming into engineering were not prepared for the math aspects of engineering. What that institution did was created a course, not remedial, but they created a course that the women who were entering engineering took, and they accelerated and succeeded beyond everyone's expectations and quickly matriculated along the path to their engineering degree. What that institution learned was that that course, which we might think of as remedial, but they didn't craft it that way and they didn't deliver it that way, it became a popular course for all the students coming into engineering. It built community. It certainly taught the math skills. So I'm just saying there are ways we could think about it, and we can think about it.
I wonder if you could comment about how the factors, the forces and models that you've talked about had an impact on the design of your new building here. Maybe talk a little bit about the process of design and how this building differs from what would have been designed 10 years ago.
Yes. Thank you for asking that question. So the theme of this building is making learning visible. So what a better way to showcase learning and emphasize learning than to build a building where learning is visible. And I think you will see that as you tour through the building. Secondly, the building is structured in a way that for good or for not good, but I think it works out well. Faculty staff offices are on the north end, including graduate student offices. Classrooms are on the south end, and in between are these wonderful collaboration spaces. You'll see that on every floor. Thirdly, in areas throughout the building are these little breakout rooms, many of which are surrounded by glass, so you can see what's going on in there. And those little breakout rooms are for spontaneous connections between faculty, staff, and students. And so the building has a whole variety of spaces, a lot of natural light coming in, which contributes to a great environment for learning, and then just multiple spaces for engagement, dialogue. Our public partners come in. So it's just a great space for welcoming, belonging, work to happen, and work's happening everywhere throughout the building. And while I'm on the topic of the building, this would never have been a possibility without the work of our former dean, Marjorie Kostelnik. So Marjorie, would you just please stand and take a bow for the work of this building? And we've been in here for a year, and of course our students are on fall break, but I'm certain that if classes were in session, you'd just be seeing things happening all over the place. So that speaks a little bit to how this building aligns with some of the examples that I gave you today.
We have time for one last question. Okay, I'll ask it. Sherri, how much time do we have to make this transition? How quickly must it occur?
Well, there is a book called 10 Years to Midnight. And it's a book about, we have 10 years to address some of these issues. So, that's a tough question to answer. I guess I would say for the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and for the NU system, our decisions are in the near future in terms of some of the financial woes and things that we're experiencing. So there are short-term decisions, but hopefully with an eye towards the future, right? I desire us to Yes, we have to look at some short-term data. We do have decisions that need to be made in the short term, but to make those with an eye on the infinite game, an eye towards, you know, the ultimate future, which is uncertain, right? So it's how do you make these short-term decisions with some uncertainty in the future, but a dream for where you want to go. Is that a non-answer? I don't know.
No, that's good. Please join me in thanking Sherri.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And I appreciate all your thoughts and questions today. And I just want to say thank you for all that you have done for the university and your time that you were with us and what many of you continue to do. I hope that we are standing on your shoulders and moving forward in a way that respects our journey to this point and takes us to the next levels. And I hope you're proud of us as a campus. So thank you.